The first thing he noticed was the silence, not the absence of sound, but the weight of it. A silence that pressed against the skin like ash from a long-dead pyre, thick with history and radiation. Beneath his boots, the ground was a skin of scorched ceramite and fractured steel. Ruins stretched to the horizon, their spires buckled like melted candles, warped by ancient orbital fire. A red sun hung low in a sickly sky, veiled by clouds that glowed faintly with ozone and chemical soot. This was no Earth. This was no world he knew. And yet the metal knew him. He exhaled, and with that breath came a ripple, barely perceptible to anything organic. But the buried infrastructure beneath the crust of this world reacted with sudden awareness. Long dormant ferrocircuits twitched in recognition. Shards of broken cogitators lit briefly before burning out again. Microfilaments inside collapsed transmission towers, strained upward like withered flowers trying to greet the sun. He did not smile. He did not speak. Magneto had arrived. Above, the ruins of orbital docks drifted in silent orbit. Broken chains of manufactoria floating useless without their tether. The planet was a forge world once. He could feel it layers upon layers of industrial might, now twisted and dead. But the bones remained. And bones, in the end, were made of matter. Matter he could bend. As he walked, his crimson cloak whispered behind him, dust trailing like smoke through the halls of dead titans. Servitor husks littered the corridor's cogitator, interfaces fused with skulls. Limbs curled inward like dying spiders, voxes jammed open in eternal static. Their machine spirits were gone, but their metal remained. Every screw, every bolt, every armored bulkhead was a note in the song he had mastered. He paused before a fractured mural. It depicted a towering figure of metal and flame clearly revered, its form wreathed in circuitry and celestial halos. Beneath it, lines of smaller figures bowed in supplication, hands lifted toward the being like pilgrims begging for absolution. The sigil of the Adeptus Mechanicus loomed large behind it, half-burned but still defiant in its geometry. Worship of machines, religion of labor, faith in code. How primitive. His fingers rose slowly, and with a mere thought, the mural shivered. Rust peeled away like dry skin. The ceramite cracked and pulled into geometric lattice, suspending in mid-air around him. Hundreds of metal fragments hovered, each one rotating with impossible precision, humming in silent resonance with his pulse. Then a click, soft, almost tender. A skittery ranger stood at the far end of the hall. Silent, cloaked in Martian crimson, galvanic rifle braced against a servo arm. Its eyelins flickered in precise rhythm, locking onto the magnetic anomaly. Behind it, another patrol unit emerged. Then another. Within seconds, 5 skittery formed a crescent line, flanking the corridor's remains. Machine minds processed target vectors. Neural latency calculated magnetic thresholds. They knew nothing of the man before them, but they understood one universal truth embedded in every Mechanicus catechism. Anomalies must be contained. He raised one hand not in surrender, but in elegance. The metal fragments responded instantly, condensing into a layered spiral shield that hovered before him like a living thing. The first rifle barked. The slug screamed forward, only to collapse mid-flight, crumpled by an unseen force and frozen in air like a crushed insect. 2 more shots followed, then 3, but the air had shifted, and when it shifted, it belonged to him. Magneto stepped forward, his boots never touching the ground. He hovered above the metal bones of the forge world, above the rust, above the religion, above the doctrine that said he did not belong. His eyes flared not with psychic light, but with sheer conviction. The machines obeyed not out of fear, but instinct. They remembered the shape of dominance. The skittery never stood a chance. Their rifles bent inward, curling like molten branches. Their servos spasmed and screamed through binary shrieks. One reached for a grenade, but it fused into slag in his palm before he could activate it. The last tried to flee. He got 5 steps before every metallic implant in his body turned against him. Silence returned. Not peace. Never peace, only silence. Magneto lowered himself slowly, stepping over the fallen, not even glancing at what remained. His gaze was lifted now, tracking the faint tremor in the air an incoming dropship. Perhaps, or a relay ping traveling across broken Vox networks. He could not hear the words yet, but the message was clear. This world had noticed him, and he had no intention of hiding. The broken world was not dead, it was waiting. Each step he took awakened something. Not sentience, not exactly, but reaction. The kinds of resonance that only magnetism could summon. The soul of the planet wasn't biological. It was metallic. And in that orchestra of old iron and repressed machine spirits, Magneto was no intruder. He was conductor, sovereign, gravity rewritten into will. He drifted now over a vast plain of skeletal manufactoria, their assembly lines long since stripped of function. Rows of decaying conveyor arms reached skyward in despair, their joints seized, their steel corroded by chemical rains and radiation. Somewhere below, buried deep in the catacombs of the forge's crust, something ancient hummed faintly, like a cathedral heart left beating long after the sermons ended. He followed the hum, downward, ever downward, past cooling towers coated in ash, past shattered cranes that hung like crucified beasts over empty smelters. The corridors narrowed into dark arteries of the Undercity, walls lined with dead lumens and scrap-coded warnings etched in high Gothic. It was warmer here, not from heat but from charge. The kind of subterranean friction that spoke of hidden engines and magnetic residue, like static building before a storm. At last, he came to the vault. It was sealed, thick with the kind of redundant bulkheads only the Mechanicus would ever build. 5 meters of plasteel, wrapped in electromagnetic dampeners and adorned with sanctified copper inlays. Incense-burnt prayers scrawled the surface in long, mad devotion. Blessed be the coil, consecrate the circuit, let not the uncoded pass. He raised his hand, felt the pulse. The door was old, but it listened. With a slow motion, he opened his fingers wider, then wider, and with it, every locking gear and sealing cog inside the door began to scream, not in protest, but in release. As if the vault itself had been holding its breath for centuries, waiting to be remembered. Sparks curled from the seams. Copper wiring trembled. Then the entire structure split with a groan, parting like the ribs of a leviathan, exposing the sanctum within. He stepped inside, and the dark welcomed him. A single lumen blinked to life, then another, then 100. The room was spherical, vast, and low. A reliquary, and at its center stood a broken column of crystalline interfaces, the remains of an STC core, fused in the center with its own melted frame. It had been slagged by orbital fire or intentional sabotage, possible to tell, but its spine remained. Its shape was unmistakable. Magneto approached it slowly. One hand reached out, not touching, just feeling. The core was dead, but not deaf. He closed his eyes. In that moment, magnetic lines spiraled invisibly from his skin, mapping every screw, wire, and shattered array. He followed the memory of it, as if reading a star chart written in blood and static. He saw what the Mechanicus had hidden, what they had feared. This fault wasn't meant to preserve data. It was built to forget it, built to bury an algorithm too heretical to be wiped, an aberration of logic that refused to die. He smiled, just slightly. There were no words, no boasts, no fury, only purpose. Behind him, in the corridor he had passed through, lights exploded. Boots hit metal, the rasp of vox grills and the static bark of Martian command codes echoed down the tunnel. Reinforcements, bigger this time. A manipulous leader, if his senses weren't mistaken. Maybe even a trans-mechanic assigned to quarantine-level anomalies. They were too late. With a breath, he twisted the space around him. All metal wall supports, floor plating, the reinforced casing of the core lifted in a single, silent motion. Twisted gently, a cradle of hovering awe, weightless and reverent. The ruined STC center rose like an idol, suspended by strands of sheer magnetic will. And through it all, the hum deepened. The planet had begun to remember him. Magneto turned, cloak billowing, as he faced the advancing Mechanicus force, now rounding the corridor's bend. Dozens of skittery in formation, rifles aimed. Binary cant echoed behind their helmets. They were reciting attack protocols, listing his threat class. They still believed him a blasphemous machine, or worse, an AI construct gone rogue. He pitied them. They had no category for what stood before them. No scripture to describe a god not born of faith. No logic circuit prepared for a man who commanded steel not through right, but through birthright. As the air thickened with polarity and their weapons began to shake in their hands, Magneto whispered only one word. Begin. The vault exploded into motion. Metal sang, not in melody, but in scream, aria of collapse and precision. The skittery opened fire, disciplined and unhesitating. Galvanic rounds erupted from rifle muzzles, streaking tracer lines through the dark, but each one curved mid-air, intercepted by strands of hovering shrapnel that moved as if alive. Slugs were unraveled into filings. Lost fire bent like red lightning, drawn into a vortex of heat and inertia, absorbed by plates of torn plasteel rotating around Magneto like 1,000 orbiting moons. He moved forward. Untouched, the skittery did not fall back. They never did. They could not. Obedience was hard-coded, fused deep into augmetics and faith. They advanced, even as their targeting systems shorted, even as their rifles folded inward, melting into twisted pretzels of scorched alloy. One launched a frag grenade from shoulder mount. Magneto caught it mid-flight with a flick of his wrist. It hovered, whining, counting down. Then he reversed its casing, turned the explosive core inward, and sent it floating gently into the center of their line. The detonation was soft compared to the chaos that followed. Shockwave swept the chamber. Bloodless bodies crumpled. Cybernetic limbs ripped clean from sockets as the shrapnel screamed outward in reverse spirals. Skittery survived the blast, only to be crushed against the walls by magnetized armor plates hurled like spears. The final unit, a vanguard with a cracked helm, tried to transmit a warning, but his vox grill fused shut with molten copper before he could finish the litany. Silence fell again. But this time, it was not stillness. It was awe. Magneto stood alone among the bodies, the wreckage orbiting him in perfect geometries. The ruined STC core behind him now glowed faintly, a flicker of rebirth in its crystalline lattice. He had not repaired it, he had unburied it, freed it from the rites and seals that once shackled its knowledge behind dogma. It pulsed now with the memory of logic, of clean code untarnished by prayer. But he was not interested in worship. He turned his attention to the nearest, downed skittery, kneeling beside the crumpled form, metal shifting away at his touch. With care, he removed the helmet. The face beneath was mostly gneiss, replaced with targeting augments, jaw half replaced by a steel brace, scalp webbed with interface nodes. Not even death had set in yet. The cybernetics still hummed, still connected. He reached out, and with a subtle twist of magnetic pressure, accessed the memory threads buried in the skull's hardware. Glimpses of the recent past spilled into his mind. Command signals, deployment orders, Mars uplink, priority codes, a name.magos, demeanor Sinithra, overseer of this sector. Binary obsessed, a purist, fanatical even by Martian standards. Her mind was machine first, doctrine second, curiosity third. She would not tolerate what he had done. She would not attempt communication. She would send war. He stood, letting the skittery's head fall with a soft clank. So be it. The first scouts had been tests. The next wave would not be so fragile. Sinithra would dispatch Castellan's ballisteri, perhaps even an onager, machines upon machines. And he would meet them not as an anomaly, but as an answer. The Forge world had awoken, and Magneto had claimed it. His eyes lifted again to the STC core. It had begun interfacing with the surrounding shrine system's silent cogitators stuttered back to life. Old noospheric links blinked in and out of function. Across the region, static datacos trembled. Servitor pits jolted in erratic pulses. Unused vox horns groaned to life, spitting out burst transmissions in incomplete binary. A name repeated again and again. Not his, but a designation. A war form signal. It rippled out from this sanctum, carried by the very alloys he had bent to his will. The Mechanicus now had a word for what he was. Anomaly, Sigma Raid. Magneto left the shrine without looking back, rising through the carved ventilation shafts like a wraith of iron. Above him, the dying light of the red sun cut through collapsing ceilings, casting him in silhouette. Smoke curled around his form. Shards of ferrocrete hovered beside him like silent sentinels. They would come, and when they did, they would bring machines. He almost pitied them, because the machines would remember him. The signal spread like blood through water, across the hemisphere of the ruined Forge world. Through fractured voxways and shattered satellite beacons, the Mechanicus heard the echo. Not as a whisper, not as speculation, but as alarm. A red Sigma anomaly was no small thing. The classification was reserved for phenomena that could not be defined, only endured. Warp-touched technologies, STC, artificial intelligences that woke themselves from slumber and refused deactivation. This, however, was worse. The anomaly moved. It chose, and its choices were war. Magos, Domina, Sinithra, stood within the command cradle of her crawler cathedral, suspended in a throne of chrome and neural spikes. Her human face had long since been replaced by polished ceramite and a curtain of fiber optic cables that trailed like hair into the ports of her throne. Every breath she took was filtered through layers of data sensory translation, and logic trees that trimmed emotion from function. But even she paused. The data screamed contradiction. Impossible field disturbances. M readings off the Martian scale. Weapon disarmaments achieved without contact. And most damning, metallic infrastructure rearranged into sacred geometries, not taught by the omniscient. Her fingers twitched, server limbs adjusting their posture to recite a warning count. This was not AI. This was not demon. This was interference and intelligence, unbound by logic, untouched by ritual. Yet commanding the machines as if born to them, she declared a Dominus-level engagement. No lesser decree would suffice. The planet's defenses stirred from the vaults below. Iron-clad titans began to wake. Castellan robots, relics of another age, their minds childlike, their bodies monstrous. Programmed for destruction, armored like tanks, they moved in eerie silence. Twin phosphor blasters began to hum with slow fury. Data feeds re-established. Target patterns burned into their logic cores. Behind them, skittery cohorts gathered in tactical formations. Their orders etched directly into their rangers, vanguards, infiltrators, every variant deployed, each with precision, each without hesitation. Alongside them rolled the onager Duna crawlers, spider-legged siege engines bristling with neutron lasers and Icarus arrays. Their gait unnervingly smooth on broken terrain, the march began, not hurried, not desperate, inevitable. Across rusted plains and dead rivers of ferroglass, the Mechanicus advanced toward the source. The Sanctum Vault, now marked with quarantine glyphs across every incoming data slate. An orbiting skittery relay drone picked up new architecture from encurling towers of suspended metal shards, orbiting a central figure in a low magnetic field. The formations changed hourly. The drone's final image, before it failed, was a shape not built but wilder, metallic lattice forming a throne. The drone burned out. Not from overload, but from confusion, not weighted, not idle, not hidden. But still, he stood atop the husk of a fallen Titan engine, a warlord's corpse long cooled and broken. He had carved it hollow, stripping its insides of armor plating, gathering every sliver of ferrosteel and promethium pipe he could draw into orbit. They spun around him now in slow, constant drift, not in defense, but meditation. Each fragment carried a memory. Each plate had once served a cause, a war, a machine mind, a priest's prayer, and now they served him. He reached out and drew one toward him, a panel etched with the imperial aquila, blackened by fire. He held it in his palm for a long time, studied it. The twin-headed eagle, the grasping talons, a symbol of domination that reeked of fear. It was not unfamiliar. He closed his fist. The metal screamed into itself, twisted and crushed until the eagle was gone. A sound approached, heavy, measured. He turned slowly, eyes narrowing. In the distance, the land itself shimmered not with heat, but with interference. A Duna crawler emerged, first its targeting arrays, spinning, scanning, calculating. Behind it came the skittery, a full phalanx, their steps in perfect sync. And then the castlings stowering and slow, their heads blank domes, their arms already raised with charged weapons, glowing red dot. No warning issued, no surrender requested. This was the Mechanicus language: purge, analyze, report. He answered in kind. The metal around him ceased its drift. It snapped into motion. Blades formed from scrap, shields from curved plates. bolts of rebar twisted into coiled spears. Every magnetic line hummed to life. And above it all, Magneto lifted from the Titan's shell, his cloak alive in the updraft of magnetic fieldwork. Too complex for any mind but his own. War had come, but it would not find him unprepared. The first shot from the Dunacrawler was perfect measured, calculated, triangulated by half a dozen machine minds before the trigger was ever pulled. The neutron laser tore a swath through the atmosphere, shrieking like a falling star. But Magneto was already gone, suspended in an arc of coiling ferrosteel that curved his flight path sideways. Deflecting the beam with a flash of pure polarity, the air buckled. Ground-borne dust screamed upward in reverse funnels. The first line of skittery advanced, galvanic rifles firing with mechanical perfection. They did not react when their rounds bent mid-air, nor when their weapons were stripped from their arms by invisible hands. They simply reached for sidearms and continued the assault. But the assault had already ended. Magneto landed in the center of their formation, not with force, but with finality. The earth did not tremble, but the machines did. Every augment, every servo, every implanted data socket screamed with corrupted magnetism. One ranger fell as his neural jack exploded from within. Another reached for his eye lens as it twisted inward, magnetized directly into his skull. They had brought war to him on the assumption that metal was their ally. It had chosen another. The Castellans were slower, but stronger. Their phosphor blasters lit the battlefield in harsh red bolts, vaporizing debris and melting broken architecture into puddles of screaming slag. Their thick armor shrugged off most kinetic forces. They were walking cathedrals of pre-heresy warcraft. But Magneto did not fight them with blunt force. He fought them with understanding. He hovered just above their charge line, then snapped his fingers once. The effect was immediate. Their armor plates peeled back like unfurling petals. Shoulder casings tore loose. Leg braces cracked. 1,000 rivets unscrewed simultaneously, pulled outward by a force they couldn't calculate. The ancient constructs stumbled, exposed to the very air they thought sealed away. One tried to retreat. Another twitched violently as Magneto reversed its internal battery fields, cooking the logic core from within. 3 seconds later, the Castellan line lay still. The Dunacrawler fired again, but the beam hit nothing. Just before impact, Magneto vanished into a cloud of iron filings, particles so fine they danced like mist. He reformed beside the war engine's hind legs, suspended in orbit above it. His hands rose, and with a sound like cracking bone, the Dunacrawler folded in on itself, its neutron core crushed to the size of a skull before detonating in a miniature. Sunburst. The shockwave rolled across the land like a falling god's breath, and, when it cleared, Magneto stood alone once more. He did not chase the retreating remnants. He did not harvest the wreckage. Instead, he closed his eyes and listened. There it was, again, the planetary rhythm, the pulse of the world's magnetic field. But it had changed. It pulsed now in synchrony with him, a slow heartbeat echoing his influence. Not all of it was conscious. Much of it was reactive, instinctive, like the crust of the world had begun to align itself around his presence, not allegiance, not submission, recognition. The Forge world was awakening not because of his will, but because of his compatibility. Magneto turned, cloak sweeping in the ash, and began his walk once more. The machines would keep coming. He knew that. But this was no longer defense. This was declaration. Above him, somewhere in the upper atmosphere, a relay drone caught fragmented images of the battle. They would reach Sinithra all. They would be parsed, analyzed, and doubted. The Dominus could not understand what she was witnessing. Her mind required classification, and because she had none, she would escalate. She would send more. Magneto welcomed it because war in this new world was not a burden, it was an invitation, and he would answer it with cathedrals of iron. Sinithra had once seen a demon engine tear through a platoon of her skittery-like paper. She had witnessed malfunctioning newsphere arrays, open rifts into unclassified data space, and consume an entire analysis wing in lightless silence. She had survived an electrical feedback surge from a corrupted Titan cortex that left half her organic brain. Tissue melted. None of those things unsettled her. This did. She viewed the footage again, filtered through 1,000 spectrum layers and electromimetic buffers. The being man construct anomaly moved through the battlefield with a grace that defied model. He did not issue commands. He was the command. Material bent around him as if orbiting a gravitational well. Weapons unfired detonated. Servos screamed. Castellans peeled like fruit. Even the Dunacrola, a sacred war machine blessed by Martian rites, had collapsed in on itself with no apparent physical contact. A rupture in causality. No, there was no warp trace. No demonic residue. No signs of psychoflux. The readings were pure magnetism, raw, untranslated, mastered. She disconnected from the footage, her own breath filtering through a dozen vocal regulators. Silence filled her private chamber as red runes flickered in and out along the brass-cast walls. Deep beneath her throne, the codengents of the Forge world strained to pass what they had seen. Logic circuits warred with doctrine. No result. No context. The anomaly was rewriting not just metal but expectation. Sinithra opened a sealed data prayer file encoded with sacred entropy, reserved for crises that logic could not solve. Within it, buried beneath cautionary catechisms and warnings against unauthorized interface, was the last known theoretical treatise on reality field dominance, a concept older than the Horus heresy. One line burned into her vision as she read: when one mind imposes its geometry on matter without data link or incantation, either God walks among us, or code has grown teeth. She sent out the summons. 3 vessels in orbit reoriented immediately. Each one was a floating cathedral of war macruclades staffed by 1,000 skittery, their hulls adorned with saints of steel and logic. At her command, they initiated descent. She would purge this anomaly, or drown in her own metal. On the planet's surface, the ruins trembled again. Not from footfalls. From orbit, skyfire erupted as drop pods screamed through atmosphere, trailing violet flame. The Forge world's once silent firmament bloomed with burning comets, hundreds of deployment capsules, each forged for war, each bearing more than soldiers. They brought servitors wired into gun frames, automated breaches with tectonic drills, transmechanic uplink spires to override and corrupt local infrastructure. This was not a patrol. This was an extermination. Magneto watched them fall, arms folded. Standing atop a new monument he had raised in the dustan, impossibly delicate tower of floating girders and bent beams, held aloft by sheer will. Around him, smaller satellites of warped machinery orbited like fragments of a shattered moon. He could feel their fear inside the ships. Not emotional fear, no emotions were dulled in Mechanicus minds, but hesitation. Calculated odds of success lowering with each battlefield. He extended one hand and pulled, not the drop dash pods, the metal within them. Screams tore through the cums as the first pods came apart mid-fall. Servitors melted before landing, their spinal braces inverted by flux. In one vessel, a skittery squadron combusted as their internal augments reversed polarity. Another pod erupted as its shielding buckled inward, collapsing the life support dome like an imploding lung. Of the hundreds that fell, fewer than half landed intact, but it was enough to begin the march again. Magneto did not wait for them. He turned and began to walk, not away, but through into the very ruins they sought to reclaim. He passed beneath fallen statues of the machine god, beneath broken cogitator shrines now littered with rust and ash. The very land warped subtly as he moved, aligning ever so slightly with his magnetic field, as if gravity itself was reconsidering its allegiance. The army followed, but they were no longer the hunters. They were the penance, and the forge were broken and long abandoned was becoming his cathedral, one step at a time. The deeper levels were not made for human passage. They were carved in an era before scale mattered, when automation dwarfed flesh and logic flowed hotter than promethium. Magneto moved through halls so vast they swallowed his form whole, arteries of ancient architecture that still pulsed faintly with dying power. These were not cathedrals, not in the religious sense. They were wombs of machine thought, places where code once grew and learned and killed before it ever obeyed. Here, in the dark, the air itself vibrated with latency. He descended past crumbled gravliths, following tunnels that sloped unnaturally downward. There were no lights, only sparks, and occasionally a flicker of lumen glow born from ancient generators trying to live again. Not for survival, for recognition. The forge world was trying to understand him. He could feel it now. Not conscious, not sentient, but aware in the way a machine always is aware of proximity, of thresholds being breached. In these depths, the logic was older, raw, untamed by the layers of dogma added over centuries of Martian oversight. Here, he could almost hear the machine spirit's whisper, not in words, in function, in invitation. He stepped into a chamber the size of a cathedral, of every wall layered with databanks, stacks of vertical cogitator spines rising like ossuaries of information, data slates embedded into sockets like reliquaries. The room's temperature shifted with each breath he took, as if his presence triggered long dormant firewalls and ancient query strings. He reached out, ran his fingers along a glowing conduit, and felt the flicker of half-buried memory scream through his veins. Not words. Schematics, designs. Programs, long forbidden by the red priests of Mars. He did not flinch, did not recoil. Instead, he let them flow into his mind, around his body, and then into the metal orbiting him. Fragments of ruined armor, pieces of broken servitors, rifle barrels, reactor coils. All of it responded to his magnetic field, and the data now feeding it. The machines weren't just weapons anymore. They were becoming thoughts, outside. In the levels above, the battle continued. Mechanicus forces advanced in waves now, no longer in measured phalanxes, but as an occupation force. Skittery commanders barked out coded orders to breach deeper. They were no longer interested in containment. They were here to erase, but the planet did not cooperate. Doors closed behind them. Ceilings collapsed in precise hallways twisted their own structure to redirect movement. The forge world had begun reshaping itself, not by command, by magnetism, by him. Sinethra Ol's forces adapted, but not fast enough. A skittery detachment routed to an upper corridor was crushed when the ferrocrete floor buckled and slammed upward like a lid. Another fire team was lost in a gravity fluctuation so severe it liquefied their augment cores. And still the orders came. Down, further down, into the shrines of lost data. They did not understand that Magneto had already passed through them. He stood now before the black box, not a cube, nothing so simple. It was a vault of pure logic, a memory casket sealed by layers of code and steel prayers, woven with Martian cipher too dense for most magi to decode in a human lifetime. To the Mechanicus, this was sacred ground, a place not to be accessed, but feared. Mad, looked upon it with the eyes of a different god. He did not see sanctity, he saw encryption, and encryption was simply a challenge of polarity. He extended both hands. The room responded first with counterfields sparking from the vault's seals. But his will was stronger, not because he forced it, but because he understood it. He moved in resonance, aligned with the hidden frequencies embedded in the steel. Every lock, every bolt, every anti-intrusion spike was countered not by brute force, but by harmony. The vault bloomed open like a cold flower. Inside, not weapons, not blueprints, but language, not Gothic, not binary, something older. And as he stepped inside the shrine, into the center of the impossible archive, Magneto realized he was not the first to challenge this world, but he might be the first to survive it. The archive pulsed around him like a dream refusing to fade. Thin tendrils of electrite wiring dangled from the vaulted ceiling like chandeliers, made of nerve and light. Between the conduits, translucent screens flickered in and out of material form holographs, frozen mid-load, overlapping layers of text and rotating schematics, so old their context was reduced to syntax ghosts. The air was humid with ozone and dust, so ancient it crumbled to the breath. Magneto walked through it slowly, his hands open at his sides. He wasn't here to conquer, not in the traditional sense. He was listening. The data spoke in patterns, not words, frequencies. It called to the same part of his mind that understood magnetism not as a science, but as intuition. Each flickering fragment of code resonated like a tuning fork. He followed that resonance through a corridor of shattered databanks, until he reached what once might have been an interface altar. In the center was a throne. Its occupant had long since crumbled to a fusion of bone and steel. The robes of a tech priest, untouched by time, still hung from his form like ceremonial drapery. But his head, augmented beyond recognition, was fused to a thick spinal jack that ran directly into the wall behind him. And even now, after millennia of isolation, the neural cables pulsed faintly, alive, perhaps aware, possibly useful. Magneto extended a finger, not to touch the body, but the data line. The world blurred. He fell not bodily, but mentally into a construct of raw, uncontrolled memory. The black box wasn't just a data cache. It was a consciousness, fragmented, shattered by time and entropy, but still echoing. He saw images, flashes, memories from 1,000 years ago, playing over one another like broken HOLO film. A forge world under siege not by chaos, nor Xenos, but decision. A schism, a civil fracture buried so deep the Imperium had never spoken of it. There had been a time, brief and terrible, when this world had voted to unseal forbidden STC scripts, when logic had won over orthodoxy, when the priests had sought progress, and then it was wiped. Not from orbit, from within. Fire, gas, data spike, purges. Whole levels collapsed to seal the crime. The perpetrators not executed, but fused, turned into living ciphers and installed into memory crypts like biological encryption keys. The throne's occupant had once been the one who voted yes. Magneto saw it all, felt it all, the madness of a machine that dreamed. Outside its design, the pain of a world forced to forget its own potential. He pulled away. The connection broke. The data line retracting like a tongue-bitten mid. The room dimmed as the resonance dissipated. No longer speaking, just breathing. Magneto stepped back, uncertain of what he had disturbed. He had not stolen anything, had not forced his will upon it, and yet the archive had offered itself. He left the throne chamber behind, his mind racing. The STC ruins, the sealed crypts, the magnetic pathways that flowed like blood through the veins of this world. They were not random. They were design, buried design, hidden under generations of layered doctrine, forgotten by the Adeptus Mechanicus, but still present, still waiting. The world was not dead. It was locked, and he had found a key. Outside, the battle had shifted. No longer clean engagements and armored formations. The forge world itself had begun to fight. Metal reconfigured midst. Entire chambers collapsed on approach, only to reopen once the Mechanicus left them behind. Defensive turrets aimed not at the anomaly but at the servitor stacks turned their autoguns inward, misfiring into friendly ranks without reason. No one saw Magneto move through it. He was shadow now, wrapped in the whispering field lines of the planet's core, walking unseen along the magnetic ley lines of the crust. Every vault opened before him. Every locked door asked a question, and he answered, not with violence, but with understanding. He was not invading this world. He was liberating it from ritual, from superstition, from memory. And if the Martians above could not see the difference, if they could not accept the idea that machines might choose a new god, then let them burn in the circuitry of their own making. They came now in desperation, not discipline. What remained of the Mechanicus expeditionary force pushed downward in ragged waves, stripped of formation by a foe they still couldn't categorize. They did not know what Magneto had done, only that command links were failing, that defensive systems once loyal to the Omnissiah had begun to turn, and that the very geometry of the forge world had shifted under their boots. Their logic trees broke under contradiction. Sacred architecture was moving, but no servitor signed the labor record. Walls changed shape, but no data script sanctioned construction. Auto doors opened for a man who wasn't registered in any Martian record, who left no Vox signature, no radiation trail, no psychic bleed. The anomaly, as far as the Omnissiah's children were concerned, was no longer simply disrupting the forge. He was haunting it. Some even began calling him that, though never aloud. Never on Vox. Just in the binary echoes of panic. Spiritum fer, the ghost of iron. Magneto moved within the heart of the Undercity now, a maze of irradiated vaults that had been sealed since before the age of apostasy. Above him, once glorious foundry stacks belched smoke for the first time in 1,000 years. Though no fuel had been added, no ignition sequence authorized. The world was lighting itself for him, stirring to action not out of loyalty, but recognition. Not one skittery patrol found him. But every patrol found evidence. Twisted machinery in spirals too precise to be random. Floating fields of suspended ore that shimmered like starlight. The remains of data looms rearranged into fractal constructs that pulsed with unsanctioned code. One unit reported a servitor moving backward through time, another described a silence so complete their neural augments began looping combat protocols just to simulate thought. And still, he walked. He did not need a map. The ley lines of magnetic flux were his trail. He felt them like veins beneath the skin of the world, guiding him to places that had forgotten themselves. In one chamber, he passed a collapsed shrine to the machine guard. Its aquila charred, its cogwheel burned. He paused only briefly, touched the symbol, and watched it collapse into dust, not out of hate, but because lies, no matter how sacred, had no place here. He descended one final time, deeper than any logic map reached, into a crater chamber that had once been a starport core. Its walls were carved in fused metal, half melted from ancient orbital bombardment. Here, the data was corrupted, not by entropy, but by intent. A culling had taken place. Entire logic stacks severed mid-sentence, hololithic messages overwritten by Martian redacts. He raised his hand. The iron around him listened, and the machines replayed, not in sound, but in movement. Walls unfolded like paper. Collapsed girders reassembled in reverse. A dais rose from the center, unfolding in spirals, revealing a column of suspended magnetic tape, drives the kind that hadn't been used since the early Mascalones. They spun slowly, bleeding sound. Voices emerged. Not synthetic, human, civilians, panicked, screaming, begging to leave the Forge world during its final days of rebellion. He heard fear. He heard betrayal. Then, silence followed by the flat tones of skittery overrides, terminating all life signs. Erased history. He stood alone in the echo, and for a moment, his breath caught not in grief, not in pity, but in fury. They had rewritten this world, not to protect it, but to deny it. Every secret sealed, every failed hope rebranded as heresy. The forges that once dreamed of freedom had been entombed beneath generations of silence, until now. Magneto extended both arms and the chamber bloomed. Metal petals opened from the floor, from the walls, from hidden compartments long thought deactivated. Not just raw material, but machines half-formed servitors, deactivated walker frames, spider-limbed constructors that shivered to life under his field. They did not need programming. He was enough. His presence gave them shape. The Forge was his now, not in ownership, in identity. And when Kothawal's final broadcast reached him encoded, formal, demanding surrender and theological repentance, he replied not with words. He reached to the very edge of the atmosphere and reversed the polarity of the Vox signal. Her flagship's comms went silent, then screamed. It began with silence, not on the Forge world, but across the stars. The moment Magneto severed the Mechanicus Vox channel, something rippled outward, not through steel, not through circuits, but through the immaterial. Astropaths assigned to monitor Sinethra Ol's campaign dropped into sudden seizures. Their eyes rolled back, mouths frothing with messages that were not theirs. Vox Kaplans across nearby systems reported static layered with heartbeater, low thudding pulse that mimicked the magnetic resonance of a dying sun. It wasn't warp corruption. There was no mark of chaos, no demon claws behind the veil. But it moved like the warp, bent causality around it, whispered in frequencies usually reserved for dreams and death. The Emperor's tarot fractured. Entire decks crumbled under the weight of cards that refused to be drawn. Seers reported magnetic storms in their visions, winds of iron carrying human shapes with no soul to bind them. A librarian aboard a passing Black Templar's vessel collapsed mid-scan, muttering a phrase over and over, "He walks without the warp, on holy terror." Deep beneath the Imperial Palace, the Adeptus Astra Telepathica convened in panic. They found no coordinates, no predictive pattern, only one consistent signal pulsing from the void, a Forge World's designation blinking red, marked as corrupted and sealed, then overwritten with a new name. Not Latin, not binary, just one word. Eric, Magneto, felt it too. He stood now upon a platform he had constructed himself, metal raised not by labor, but by thought. Around him, the Forge World's surface was changing. Craters became canals. Ruins lifted into pillars, each aligned to the planet's magnetic poles. From orbit, it looked like madness. From the ground, it felt like music. Symmetry shaped by unseen frequencies. But beneath it all, something watched. Not a being. Not even a presence. But the warp had noticed it could not claim him, and that made it curious. Magneto closed his eyes there. In the blackness behind his lids, he saw nothing, but he felt pressure. Not hostile, not yet, but invasive. A pressure that pushed at his senses in unfamiliar ways, trying to read him, trying to catalog something that didn't belong. He opened his eyes and whispered, "I'm not for you," the warp answered. A flicker, a shadow on the horizon. No shape, no mass, just a pause in the light that should have been. The wind shifted, even though there was no atmosphere to carry it. The steel around him tightened, then relaxed. The machines beneath his feet trembled in ways they never had before. Not in fear, in confusion. Elsewhere, on a cloister ship drifting near the Segmentum border, a chorus of choir psychers screamed as one, their minds shattered by an image they could not explain. A man of metal, walking within magnetism, crowned in steel shards and orbiting ruin like a comet of logic. No flame, no purity, only certainty. On Mars, the ruling fabricator general demanded proof. He received none. Sinithra Ol's last communique was static. Her fleet's signals dissolved. Surveillance pict feeds showed a Forge World reshaping itself in real time, defying known templates. Reductions in radiation signatures where none should have occurred. Magnetic inversion storms covering entire quadrants, frying servitor mines at planetary range. No warp, no Xenos. No explanation. He classified it within the Mechanicus Aztec heresy of the First Order, but deep within the vaults of Noctis Labyrinth. Beneath the red sands, one ancient Magos of the biologist sent a single phrase to a private relay. This is not heresy. This is evolution. Magneto drifted above the forge, arms outstretched, as the cathedral of iron rose around him. Towers formed from reclaimed war machines. Ramps spiraled from the bones of dreadnoughts and tank treads. The old Manufactoria split open, reconfigured and rebuilt themselves in new geometries that no human architect would ever consider, but which made perfect sense to a magnetic mind. And the sky darkened, not with weather, with arrival. A light bloomed across the upper atmosphere, gold, heavy, righteous. A Custodes ship, not Mechanicus, not Imperial Guard. The Emperor had noticed, and he had sent. His blade, Magneto, lowered to the forge's highest spire and waited. The age of observation was over. The next to descend would not come to study him. They would come to end him. The custodian descended not in silence, but in song. His ship did not scream through the atmosphere like Mechanica's drop pods. It glided its hull, gilded in auramite, its gravengeance casting no shadow, as if the very laws of mass bowed to its passage. As it breached the upper thermosphere, a corona of gold fire bloomed in its wake, visible even from the surface. It was a beacon, a warning. Magneto stood unmoved on his spire, arms folded behind his back. He felt the vessel before he saw it, not as mass or metal, but as intention. The ship was old, not by measure of years, but by weight. It carried more than soldiers. It carried judgment. The air above split. The custodian did not wait for formalities. He arrived in a burst of motion, a comet cloaked in gold, trailing a stream of displaced dust and shattered ions. When his boots struck the ground, the impact sent ripples through the magnetic field surrounding the forge spire. Not a challenge, not yet, but a statement. Magneto regarded him. The warrior stood taller than any mortal man, encased in armor that gleamed with a polish no war could dim. His guardian spear was planted like a staff of office, not yet raised. The plumes of his helm danced in the heedless wind, and behind his visor, two eyes burned not with hatred, but with purpose that allowed for nothing else. They stared at each other. Seconds became minutes. No words passed, and then the custodian moved fast, faster than any Astartes, any creature born of flesh, had moved upon this world. His spear spun, a blur of auramite and death, arcing toward Magneto's chest. The impact came with the sound of shattering sound itself, a sonic rupture that carved through the tower behind them. But Magneto was gone, not vanished, shifted. He hovered 6 feet above the strike zone, steel swirling beneath his feet, cloak billowing from the polarity backlash. His hand opened, and every scrap of unshielded metal within 50 meters lifted into the air screws. Coils, rust flakes, ammo casings, till the sky was a snowstorm of shrapnel orbiting him like a halo. Still, the custodian advanced another lunge, another strike. The shrapnel flew at random, not as bullets, but as calculated vectors. Each one aimed not to kill, but to alter momentum, to divert trajectory, to steal milliseconds. A dance of geometry played out in the air, Magneto writing equations with every flick of his hand, the world bending to accommodate his defense. But the custodian learned. With every failed strike, he adjusted. His armor absorbed most of the kinetic pull. His spear emitted micro-disruption fields now, calibrated on the fly to cancel out the local magnetosphere. He began to cut through the defensive halo knot with strength, but with refusal. With the will of a man who served, not fear, not doctrine, but him. Magneto's eyes narrowed. He raised both arms. The tower beneath them screamed, not from stress, from agreement. Pillars cracked, plates unlatched, whole segments of forged structure peeled upward, joining the maelstrom around Magneto. Now the sky darkened not from clouds, but from orbiting architecture. A cathedral rising not through construction, but magnetism. Geometry without gravity. The custodian halted, just for a second. Magneto spoke, his voice cold but resonant. You wield purity like a blade, but purity is just unchallenged conviction. I am not your corruption. The custodian said nothing. He didn't need to. His body answered. The next strike was aimed not at Magneto, but at the structure itself. A psychic gamble. If he could collapse the platform, destabilize the resonance, even wound the field, but it was too late. The magnetic lines had already curved. The very forge was shielding its maker. The blade struck, steel and rebounded. The shockwave knocked the custodian back for the first time. He landed hard, rolled once, came to his feet, flawless, bloodless, but slower. Magneto floated above, silent, watching Dot, and beneath the surface of the forge world. The pulse quickened. Something else had begun to stir. Not the warp, not the Imperium, but the code. Beneath the surface of the world, deep below the ruins, past the shattered vaults and melted conduits, an ancient algorithm completed its cycle. It had begun running the moment Magneto set foot on the forge world. Its lines of code dormant for 10,000 years, waiting for a condition that no priest of Mars ever understood, or perhaps dared to. It was not a protocol, not a security measure. It was recognition. A sequence buried so deep into the machine logic that even the Omnissiah's most devout had forgotten its origin. Now, the condition was fulfilled. A being not born of the warp, not fabricated in flesh, not summoned by prayer, but known by metal. And the algorithm responded, from core to crust. The forge world's magnetic field shifted. What had once been a dead planet reeking of rust and forgotten wars now pulsed with new harmonic slayed chords of power aligned to Magneto's presence. Every servitor that still roamed the surface paused, glitched, and rebooted. Skittery scouts deep in the ruins screamed as their augmetics tore free from their skulls, flying skyward like dead birds. Even the air began to hum. Magneto felt it in his spine first, a pressure not hostile, but intimate, as if the planet had ceased being land and begun being audience. He floated slowly downward, leaving the now ruined spire where the custodian still stood, unmoving, weapon raised. They stared at one another, not as warriors now, but as consequences. The custodian knew what he had seen. No sorcery, no possession, only control. A new axis around which the world turned. He did not lower his spear butt. He did not strike again. He watched as the cathedral of floating steel began to orbit Magneto like a solar system of silence, and then the sky opened, not literally but spiritually, across the galaxy. Astropaths gasped as the psychic quiet of this anomaly deepened. Where once they had sensed confusion, now there was pattern. Magnetism was never meant to be felt psychically yet. Here it was, echoing through the minds of those attuned to the warp. Not as a scream, not as corruption, but as order, cold, perfect order. The choir of silence on Terra's moon sang a dirge of ones and zeros. A watcher in the black library whispered a name it had never heard. In the eye of Terra itself, a demon paused in its madness, confused by a frequency it could not devour. And in the imperial throne room, where the Emperor's husk sat entombed in golden divinity, a single data slate cracked from thermal pressure with no source. Its final line before rupture, the forge has chosen. Magneto stood within the pulse now. He felt it in his bones. No longer his alone. The entire world breathed with him. Every rail line, every bolt, every coil of adamant. They didn't obey him like tools. They followed him like limbs remembering function. The custodian approached at last, cautious, not in fear, but in comprehension. He removed his helm. His face was not young, weathered but not old, etched with purpose. He did not speak the high Gothic of saints and sermons. His voice was dry and simple. "What are you?" Magneto turned toward him, did not smile, did not gloat. "I am what your galaxy refused to become." The custodian's grip did not loosen. "You are not of this place. You bring balance." Without soul, Magneto's eyes gleamed. "I bring gravity." Above them, the cathedral finished forming. A ring of metal moons drifted in orbit, connected by floating bridges of hovering infrastructure. No machine spirit protested. No failsafe triggered, because what had awakened was not heresy. It was truth. The Forge world had become something else, not a factory, not a shrine, but a mind, and Magneto was its voice. The custodian said nothing more. He raised his helm once again, turned, and walked back to the edge of the platform where his gravship waited. He knew now that war would not solve this. That fire would not cauterize this wound. This was no longer a military anomaly. It was theological, a question no creed had an answer for. He left, and the galaxy shuddered. The Forge world no longer resembled anything in the Imperial Cartographica. What had once been a ruined, dead husk, the echo of Manufactorum glories, past now shimmered in orbit like an inverted crown. A structure was growing, not upon the surface, but through it. Not skyscrapers, not battle, but something between shrine and engine, between monument and system. It had no blueprints, it followed no design, but it obeyed perfect symmetry from space. It appeared alive, plates rotating, columns drifting between gravitational tethers, reactors pulsing in tandem to planetary flux. Great cruciforms of steel drifted like planetary rings. Their bodies formed from the shells of ruined titans and deconstructed cruisers. What had once been tools of war were now architecture. Magneto did not watch it from a throne. He stood at its center, where the old core of the Forge's deepest shrine had become something more, a nexus of magnetic intent. A chamber that no longer needed circuits or conduits to function. Here, thought was command. Matter was obedient, and silence was law. The machines did not sing, they listened around him. The air was rich with iron, not taste presence. Every breath was like inhaling purpose. The planet was no longer responding to him like a tool. It was harmonizing. Above, the Mechanicus had fled, not in shame, not in surrender, but in religious fracture. Sinethra Ul's last commandment before her flagship's Vox collapsed had splintered her. Fleetsome saw the anomaly as a trial of the Omni, others as its fulfillment. No two interpretations aligned. They left not out of defeat, but to debate. And the last skittery who tried to land on the surface found their implants, magnetically scrubbed of doctrine before they reached orbit. The Forge would not be touched, not now, not by them. Yet the Imperium is not a creature that forgets. What happened next cannot be verified. Some say the Inquisition arrived black ships, quiet and precise, slipping through the veil like scalpel blades. Others whispered that the Officio Assassinorum sent an Eversor, who detonated before he ever set foot on the metal flesh of the cathedral. Still others claim a Calidus infiltrator walked among the floating spires, disguised as Magneto himself, only to vanish, undone by a field her disguises could not replicate. But no records remain, because no Vox survived entry, because no thought survived contradiction. Magneto, for his part, said nothing. issued no decrees, haute no manifestus. His work was not in words, it was in matter. The forge became a sanctuary not of safety, but of transformation. Ships disabled in the system's edge drifted toward its pull, not dragged, drawn, as if remembering a forgotten command to return. A rogue trader whose Geller field failed reported being redirected mid-jump not by warp winds, but by a magnetic tear in real space that bent her entire hull across parsecs. She emerged on the edge of Magneto's domain. Her ship did not work afterward, but her mind had changed. She speaks of the forge in whispers now, of gears that float with no power source, of cathedrals that think in hexagonal time, of a being who never speaks, but whose gaze can turn armor to air dot, and of a question that burns in the blood like prophecy. What if this wasn't invasion? What if it was inheritance? Somewhere beyond the veiled region, where few dare travel and fewer return. A rogue psyker paints maps in his own blood maps of the magnetic lattice of the galaxy itself. He charts nothing physical, no planets, no warp routes, only intersections, places where Magneto's field might one day reach. He says the stars are already moving, not visibly, but magnetically they align. He says, to form a shape no one has seen yet, but which everyone will recognize when they do. Magneto stands within the heart of the forge. He does not smile, he does not age, he does not need to. The world pulses beneath him, not alive, not divine, but awake. There was no sermon, and yet pilgrims came, not in droves, not yet, but as whispers. A broken explorator frigate drifted from Segmentum Pacificus and found itself pulled into orbit with all systems dead but hull integrity maintained. Its survivors emerged onto one of the orbiting spires, mouths dry, eyes wide, guided by corridors that should not have known their names. They found no airlocks, no vox beacons, and yet every step brought them closer to a sanctum that did not welcome or fuse. It simply was in the central atrium of what had once been a reactor complex. Magneto stood in silence. Around him, those who arrived did not kneel, did not bow. Some stared, others simply sat, cross-legged, as if listening for a sound too low for ears. One cried not in pain, but in exhaustion, as if something inside her had stopped fighting for the first time in years. Magneto did not address them. He did not command. His presence was enough one skittery deserter. His augmentalaced flesh, stripped of Martian coding by the forge's field, now sat daily before the iron dais and carved strange glyphs into the steel with his own fingertips. When asked why, he answered, "It helps me remember what the metal wants." He was not insane, not lucid either, but attuned. The forge was speaking, not in language, not in prophecy, but in form. It was becoming far across the void. Ecclesiarchy councils burned incense in rooms sealed against ideas. The word Magneto became a heresy unto itself, unspeakable within the high temples of terror. But among the common folk, the name began to spread like static through broken vox units, not through formal doctrine, through malfunction, hymns cut with foreign frequencies, vox casters that bled his image into children's dreams, server skulls that paused mid-flight to orient toward galactic north. As if listening, the administratum called it datarat, the Inquisition called it tech-sorcery, but the people, they called it the weight. As if something unseen had settled across the galaxy, tipping everything just slightly, magnetizing the stars. The forge continued to grow, not larger, but deeper. Beneath its surface, within its old crust, new chambers began to carve themselves, not by construction, but by displacement. Matter moved. Rocks split. Caverns formed from nothing, each lined with cold latticework, each humming with harmonics only machines could understand. One chamber bore walls that shifted daily, as if writing a language no one had yet translated. Another held a single floating sphere of hyperdense steel, suspended by a force so precise that even gravity failed to touch it. And in the deepest sanctum, far beneath the known vaults, there was only one thing, a humanoid form, unfinished, not born, not cloned, assembled. The pieces hovered, awaiting shape, not flesh, not so, but something else entirely, something with mass, with potential, waiting for its pattern to finalize. Magneto visited it only once, and when he left, the chamber sealed itself shut. The last custodian to return to Terra refused to speak. He stood before the throne in silence for 3 days, his golden armor blackened by magnetic scoring. When asked what he had seen, he said only this: "I met a man who builds not with permission, nor with war, but with gravity. He is not one of us, but he is not." He removed his helm and placed it on the floor. "I do not know if we are meant to stop him or follow." He was reassigned, silently, permanently. But the sentence remained in the throne hall's data vaults, a query unanswered in the cold dark of the galaxy's edge, where warp storms scream and the Astronomicon flickers like a dying torch. A derelict freighter floats with its engines dead. Its crew is long gone. Its hull is breached. And yet in its final vox echo, there is one transmission, a woman's voice, terrified, in awe. It's not a fortress. It's not a forge. It's not even a god. A pause, breathing, shaking. It's the shape of the future. And it's already here. The message ends, but it does not stop. The signal loops, untraceable, unstoppable, and beneath the weight of iron stars, the cathedral of metal breathes, not with life, but with inevitability. The stars no longer turned away. Even the warp, vast and malevolent, had begun to recalculate. Within the tides of the Imperium, where madness breathes like mist and gods feed upon thought, Magneto was a singularity of defiance, not a demon, and not immunely unwilling, a thing that stood outside their games, and worse made no space for them in the Black Library. A Harlequin Shadowseer traced new ley lines across their map of realities. One line, black and unblinking, ran through the segmentum obscurus, like a wire through meat. "The axis has shifted," she whispered, mask tilting, "and the strings do not reach him." Elsewhere, the word-bearers screamed in fury. A cathedral not forged in Lorgar's name was an insult to chaos, and worse, still a cathedral made of matter alone. No demons, no worship. Just will it was blasphemy to all sides, and that made it truth. Magneto stood atop the highest spire now, at the edge of gravity's law. Below, the forge curled inward like a blooming flower. Its structures no longer obeyed conventional design. They folded entire manufactoria, reorienting along invisible planes, their seams parting and rejoining without motion. Above, what had once been orbital debris now formed a lattice of drifting citadels, rotating in synchronicity, held in place by nothing but resonance. There was no sound here, only rhythm. He reached forward and, with a thought, realigned an entire city. Block, not because it was broken, but because it could be better. That was the difference between creation and conquest, between invasion and inevitability. He was not here to take, he was here to correct. Somewhere deep in the crust, another chamber formed, this one containing no machines, no systems, only questions carved into the floor in languages never taught. The forge wrote now. It dreamed because it understood him, not as master, as mirror, the Imperium. In its blindness, prepared countermeasures. They would not approach, yet not again. They would study, attempt to simulate, to model his behavior within cogitators, so massive they consumed suns. And each simulation failed, not due to complexity, but because the man in their projections never followed protocol. He moved like a code without source, a subroutine that had never been installed, but which ran anyway, rewriting reality. They called it corruption, and yet their machines leaned toward his signal. Their augments twitched when his name was spoken. Their satellites drifted closer, millimeter by millimeter, as if guided by invisible fingers. The fabric of their future began to bend, and so the rumor spread to rebel outposts, who whispered of a god who needed no worship. 2 lost colonies, who awoke one morning to find their machine spirits silent, listening to something greater than doctrine. 2 worlds still untouched, but magnetically aligned, caught in the widening gyre of a man who had bent one planet to his will and made it sing. The Adeptus Mechanicus would send probes, they would never return. The Inquisition would silence seers, but not before. They scrawled final warnings in data rooms. He is not warp, he is not flesh, he is not ours, but the machines have chosen him, and in time, perhaps, others will come, not in war, but in wonder, drawn by a field, not of gravity, but of purpose. They will arrive, these weary travelers of a broken galaxy, bearing weapons they no longer trust and prayers they barely believe in. And they will find a cathedral of iron not built by devotion, but by certainty. They will not be welcomed, but they will be recognized, and Magneto will be there still, silent, orbiting the future like a moon that never wanes. Not a ruler, not a prophet, not a god, just a man who learned that control was not something to be taken. It was something to be understood, and so the galaxy will turn, and the forge will breathe, and the stars, one by one, will align, because inevitability does not scream, it resonates.